Jean Cardinal Daniélou was one of the 20th century's leading experts on the fathers of the church. He was one of those figures who, before Vatican II, was considered a progressive Jesuit bent on reforming the church, but after the council was one of those voices saying, well, maybe we've gone a little bit too far here. Maybe we need to kind of re-envision a few things. This formidable intellectual was one of the guiding lights behind the reiteration of the Church's teaching against contraception in the 1968 document Humanae Vitae. He also vigorously defended the Church's teaching on priestly celibacy, as his colleagues in academia turned on him for being a traitor. On May 20th, 1974, he was found dead in a fifth-floor apartment on the Rue de Lange 56 in Paris, belonging to a woman named Mimi Santoro. And not to get too much into it, but she was part of the oldest profession in the history of the world, so we'll put it that way. So what do we have here with this story? Leading conservative intellectual churchman found dead in the home of a woman of the night. Just another in a long series of hypocritical priests who abuse their power, preaching one thing and then doing another, right? The Jesuits launched an investigation, and the results were kept silent. I mean, it all seemed pretty obvious. Or was it? It was not until 2012 that the truth actually emerged. Mimi was caught up in human trafficking, something that was not her original intent to get into, after her husband ended up in jail, and she felt that she had no other option. The cardinal took the money from the books that he wrote on theology to bring to her to pay for her daily needs, visiting her and encouraging her so that together they could find a way out of this horrendous situation that she found herself in. No judgment, no anger, just charity and mercy. Now, Mimi said nothing when Cardinal Daniélou died, because she was utterly terrified of the consequences a spotlight on her could bring about for her family, that she was trying in her own way to protect. The Jesuits found out that the cardinal was actually innocent of the charges volleyed at him by the news media, but they said nothing, because the powers that be seemed to be happy with the tarnishing of a man who rejected their agenda. Interestingly enough, just a few days before his death, the cardinal wrote the following words in his diary. Jesus, I have come to know that you do not want me to distinguish my sins from the other sins of the world, but to enter more deeply into your heart and consider myself responsible for the sins of those persons whom you may wish, those of Alain, who was his brother, of anyone else as it may please you. You make me feel, Jesus, that I must descend even lower, take with me the sins of others, accept as a result all the punishments that these may draw down upon me from your justice, and in a particular way, the disdain of the persons for whom I will offer myself, to accept the great abasements of which I am not worthy, in order to be ready at least to accept the small ones. Then, Jesus, my charity will resemble that with which you have loved me. These words were published by his brother, Alain, who is actually an apostate from the faith to Hinduism, who is partnered with another man, and who wrote of his brother, He tried to help prisoners, criminals, troubled young people, prostitutes. I deeply admired this ending of life similar to that of the martyrs, whose fragrance rises to heaven amid the opprobrium and sarcasm of the crowd. He died as true saints die, in ignominy, in mockery, in the disdain of a spiteful and vile society. A spiteful and vile society. Now, you know, I love this world. It is a beautiful thing created by God for our enjoyment, but this is not our true homeland. And spiteful and vile are adjectives which, unfortunately, I think can describe at least a lot of the current climate of the world in which we live. We lack the humility to see, accept, and change the darkness that many of us don't want to admit that we still carry within ourselves as a result of sin. Because we are hurt, we turn around and hurt others as well. And so we seek out the mite in our brother's eye instead of the log in our own. We don't think twice about why we are so eager to mention other people's names in conversation, dissect their every action, assume their motivations, and broadcast the findings of what we think is clear-cut evidence to anyone and everyone who will listen. And if someone even hints at the fact that we're being little more than a gossip, we lash out, "How dare you?" But as soon as we sit behind a computer screen, we start dividing people against each other. And slander and rash judgment become our daily bread. And we do all of this in a context of fake news, in a context where narcissists want to gaslight us to cover up sordid deeds, a context where activists are determined to leave no stone unturned to out truth that has been hidden by those with an agenda to destroy others. We live in a dangerous place. In this country, particularly, you can almost bring a lawsuit against anyone for any reason, tying up resources and finances on all kinds of pretexts. The principles of innocent until proven guilty and equality before the law have been replaced by vigilante justice by various forms of media, social and otherwise. It's almost like we're caught in one of those mazes of mirrors in a haunted house. What is real? What is true? How do we know, and what do we do about it? How can the innocent be protected and receive justice? And how can the guilty be punished and not harm anyone else? Now, as St. Francis de Sales, whose introduction to the devout life has been accompanying us through 2020, now, as he points out, to see or know something is not to pass judgment on it. It is permissible to doubt or suspect in the strict sense, and as far as proof and arguments compel us to do so. But things are not always what they seem. And even what is as plain as the nose on our face isn't always, as was the case with Cardinal Danielou's death. So how do we avoid falling into this trap of slander and rash judgment? First of all, St. Francis de Sales reminds us, those who look carefully into their consciences are not very likely to pass rash judgment. The thoughts of good men do not go out in search of things concealed among the cloudy actions of our neighbors. It is part of an unprofitable soul to amuse itself with examining the lives of other people. Now, this is a very gentle way of saying what I would put more bluntly: mind your own business and check yourself, right? It is also important for us to remember that slander comes under the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," and is a form of murder. As St. Bernard of Clairvaux preached, the one who slanders and the one who listens to a slanderer have the devil in their company. I want you to think about how utterly terrifying this is. Next time the banter at the office and the break room veers into this territory, it is a sober thing to think that the same Satan who tempted our Lord Jesus Christ in the desert is hanging out around the water cooler too. We might not want to admit it, but when your gossipy relative is telling you all about some family drama, the person who is sitting across from you in the living room is the devil. We also must avoid the artifice by which we pretend we're being helpful by repeating gossip. The archer draws back the arrow near himself so he can shoot the dart with greater force. Slander spoken in a joking way is even crueler than all the rest. Taken alone, hemlock is not a quick but rather a slow poison and can easily be cured. But when taken with wine, there is no antidote for it. Also, just because you saw someone do something once doesn't mean that they are in a habit of it. St. Francis de Sales reminds us, Noah got drunk once, and Lot twice, yet neither one was a drunkard. Because St. Peter shed blood does not mean that he was a bloodthirsty man, nor was he blasphemous because he once blasphemed. Even if a man may have been addicted to a vice for a long time, we are in danger of falsehood if we call him a vicious man. Since God's goodness is so immense that a single moment suffices for us to ask for and receive his grace, what certainty can we have that a man who yesterday was a sinner is such today? It is only the last day that judges all days. We must never draw conclusions from yesterday to today, nor from today to yesterday, and still less to tomorrow. So what is St. Francis de Sales getting at with all of this? People can change. Grace can totally transform the life of another person. Don't dangle people's sins over them. It's one thing to speak out against evil, but are we doing it to the person involved with a view to helping them tend towards good? Or are we just virtue signaling to others because really deep down inside, we have a desire for revenge? We need to be honest with ourselves. When the name of another person passes your lips, what are you doing? And more importantly, why? What is your hidden agenda? And who do you think you're fooling? We should be in the business of encouraging people to do the right thing, to become virtuous and holy. And so often we get this wrong because it's a shortcut, isn't it, to wag the finger. Right? It's so much harder to be patient. Accusation, recrimination, engaging in the call-out culture, if our heart is not motivated by compassion and kindness, then nothing we say or do is going to bring about positive change. I have learned this lesson at great personal cost because I'm an idiot, right? But it is absolutely true. And we are fooling ourselves if we think it's any other way. Finally, St. Francis de Sales gives us advice on what to do when we hear slander. When you hear anyone spoken ill of, make the accusation doubtful if you can do so justly. If you cannot, excuse the intention of the accused party. If that cannot be done, express sympathy for him. Change the subject of conversation, remembering yourself and causing the rest to recall that those who do not fall into sin owe it all to God's grace. Recall the slanderer to himself in a mild way and tell of some good deed of the offended party if you know of any. It's not enough for us not to ourselves engage in gossip. It's not enough for us to just stop listening to slander. As St. Francis de Sales wrote, the man who could free the world of slander would free it from a large share of its sins and iniquity. As Christians, we have a duty to speak the truth in love. But we also have to make sure that our hearts are in the right place. We need to have some street smarts to realize that some people just want to pull us into their drama. And they have their own agendas in doing so. To preserve our spiritual peace and our freedom, don't take the bait of rash judgment and slander. Because what's on the other end of that fishing line is not a friend or a loved one, it's Satan. As a parish, our Lenten project has two themes. You're going to hear about this lots during Lent. Remember our two watchwords for Lent: simplify and unify. When we refuse to engage other people's drama, it is amazing how much it simplifies our lives. Okay? You do you. I am not getting caught up in all of that. It simplifies everything. And if we are to unify, we can also at the same time be the source of dividing people from each other. What does love do? Love unites and brings people together. If you are driving them apart, then you are one of the thorns in the Lord's crown during his passion. Where are you piercing his brow? The precious blood that's coming out of his head is because of you. Get a clue, right? The Lord Jesus sweat blood on the eve of his death in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying what?